Don't know exactly what happened, but Internet Explorer did not like something either that I was saying or that I was doing, or maybe it just doesn't like me. So I'm going to see. I'm going to give it a second and make sure everybody can um, see and hear me. Um, it's not frozen on my side. They said they can't see me, so let me try it again. There I am. Nope, I meant to say now. All right, so Patty can see me. Bridget, yes. Paula, all right. So most can. Beverly, no. But if you can't see me, it's all right, Beverly. You're not missing anything. As long as you can see the slides, it's all right. All right, so it looks like most everybody can see and hear now. So I think we might be okay. Let's see if we can get going here. And I'll switch back and forth between the slides, and sometimes I need to make a point or do some commentary, and so I'll switch the slides off. So don't worry about that. So what I'm going to do is talk about this idea of intentional eating. What we'll do is we'll do this in sort of two parts. We'll talk about intentional eating first, and then go through accountability and what that means and how that works with this idea of intentional eating. So first part, we're going to go through and say, what is intentional eating? What is structure, and how do we build to that point of intentional eating using the structure? Okay. And at the end of this, hopefully you should have a tool that you can practice with that allows you to understand this concept and put this into play with the goal of helping you be more consistent in your day-to-day food choices and how you navigate different situations. So you'll see we'll do a little exercise at the end, and maybe people can chime in with their own examples, and we can work through those. All right, so number one problem I see when I'm working with patients who are in our program is that they struggle because a lot of their eating is what I call non-purposeful eating. All right, so what does that mean? Well, it's unplanned eating. So if I look back and think through my week, how many of my meals and snacks were things that I had planned to do, let's say that day, that morning when I woke up, I knew, okay, I'm going to eat this, I'm going to eat that, I'm going to eat this. How much of that was planned and how much of that was sort of happenstance or opportunistic eating, so to speak, right? I ate it simply because it was available. Eating based on suggestion is another type of unplanned eating. Someone comes up to me and says, hey, wouldn't you like so-and-so? Yeah, sure, why not? Otherwise, if that person had not been around or made that suggestion, I would not have considered eating at that particular moment, and maybe I wouldn't even consider eating that particular item. Another way to think about eating based on suggestion, I go to a restaurant, I know I'm going to eat something, and I have in my head I'm going to eat a certain thing, and then the waiter suggests, oh, we have this on special today. Doesn't that sound lovely? Sure, let me try that. Right, so that's eating based on suggestion. I'm making a change to my plan or making a choice based on a suggestion. And then the last part of that sort of purposeful eating or non-purposeful eating is just sort of irregular meal timing and spacing. So it's I eat when I have an opportunity to or when I think about it, but otherwise I really don't plan out. Here's the time of day. Here's the interval in which I need to eat on a regular basis throughout the day. And so I sort of put food in around all the other things that I have to do. And sometimes I get to food when I think I should and when I'm really hungry. And other times I don't get to eat until I get overly hungry, and then I make even worse choices, or my portions get too big. But that irregular meal timing and spacing becomes part of that non-purposeful eating. So those are, I think, in summary, that's really the one of the main problems that I see for people who are joining our program, is that they lack that consistency in terms of purposeful eating. And I should say, if people have questions, please just send the questions through chat. I'll be checking regularly to make sure that I can address any questions. So the opposite of non-purposeful eating is intentional eating. And so what do we mean by intentional eating? So first off, we think of it as eating at defined intervals where we space our calorie intake throughout the day. All right. So think about it like this. If we're going to take a trip across the country, we don't buy all of the gas that we need all up front. We buy some gas and it gets us a certain distance, and then we stop and we get more gas, and that gets us a certain distance. And so it's sort of how we need to be thinking about spacing our energy throughout the day. Let's put our energy in the intervals that we need it most. Let's not put it in spaces where we don't need it much because we're not as active, like we're sleeping overnight, for example, so we don't need to wake up in the middle of the night to eat, obviously. Those types of things. But even sort of thinking about, the distribution of calories and making sure that we're thoughtful about that is important as a part of this concept of intentional eating. The second part of intentional eating is that your goals of eating are informing your food choices, right? So I am not simply, eating because those things are available or things that I prefer, and only eat those things that I have a strong preference for or really like a lot. I'm actually eating based on a particular goal or with an intent in mind. So this is, many people have heard the sort of concept of eat to live. This is really kind of an ultimate form of that, where you say, I am eating to live a life without high blood pressure, or I'm eating to live a life with no heart disease, or I'm eating to better control my diabetes. That's a different way of thinking about eating compared to, well, I'll eat whatever is put in front of me and hope that it's okay. So this is a really sort of different way of thinking about that idea of eating to live. The last part of this sort of intentional eating concept is being present and accountable. And so what it says is that when you make a certain choice, you understand that that choice leads to a certain consequence, and that you understand what those consequences are. And so by default, it means that we are always in control of what the choices that we're making. We're not allowing food to control us. We're, on the other hand, we're making conscious choices, and we're saying we're going to be accountable for those choices and the consequences of those choices. And that totally changes around the perspective versus I feel like I'm being driven by my cravings, and I can't seem to get off of the roller coaster that leads me to want more and more and more. So those are the sort of three defining sort of pillars, if you will, of the idea of intentional eating. So let's talk through some of these. Timing is everything. If you think about it from a physiologic standpoint, our bodies work by internal clocks. And all of the things that, we have in terms of regular bodily function is to some extent regulated by, sort of a master clock in the brain that controls sleep cycles, hormonal cycles, and all of those things are working together. When we ignore those clocks, our bodies get confused. So if you talk to people, for example, who work night shift or third shift, they can tell you when you switch from day work or day shifts to night shifts that there's some things that don't seem to act quite right or don't feel quite regulated. That's because, again, our brains are tuned to want to be awake during the day, sleep at night. We're diurnal, meaning that we're supposed to consume most of our calories during the daytime and have a fasting period overnight, compared to nocturnal animals like rodents who sleep during the day and are up foraging at night. And so timing is important when we think about, sort of regulating appetite, bodily function, metabolism, blood glucose control. All these things are really built into or affected by clocks. Our goals need to be aligned with our choices. And so this is an example of how a goal should dictate what your choice is, which would lead to a consistent outcome. So, for example, if we have a goal of lowering our blood pressure, we want our blood pressure to be lower, maybe without medication, we can make choices about our dietary intake to say, well, I'm going to have a diet pattern that includes more fruits and vegetables and is low in sodium, low in salt, and that combination of choices leads to an outcome of a lower blood pressure with fewer medication. So those are the types of things that when you are doing intentional eating, you start out with a goal and decide, here are the types of choices that I want to make in order to achieve that goal. And our job here at Weight Management is to help you understand, here's the best way to put together a meal plan that leads to the outcome that helps you achieve that goal. So you want to, if you haven't identified, well, why am I eating the way I'm eating? What are the things that would inform my choices? If you haven't laid out any particular goals, then this could be some homework for you, is to start laying out some very specific goals that help you consistently make better choices. Okay? Structure is your friend. So some of us may have seen an office like this where, this person probably thinks, I know where everything is in this office, right? We've got friends like this. We know people who, have spaces like this. Nobody else could live in them, but they can. The challenge is that, this person might know where everything is in that space, but it's inefficient. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to be able to find those things, and it looks pretty dangerous anyway. So your approach to eating should not take this sort of scattershot approach, right, where you don't think about it, you don't have any structure or organization to it, but you just sort of say, wake up and wing it, if you will. You want to, have a daily plan for your food intake. Start off with things like, well, when will I start and end eating? What are the times of the day that will encompass my clock for eating, the time of the day that I'm going to consume my calories? How long do I need between eating episodes? So most of our patients, we tend to recommend about 3 hours, but that varies by person. And it may vary by how busy you are in a given day or how active you are. But for most people, about 3 hours is a reasonable amount of time. And then where do I need to put my calories in that, those 3 hour intervals? Where do I want the bulk of my calories? Do I want my largest meal to be at the middle of the day, or do I want it to be at the end of the day? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks of doing that? Do I want to start with my largest meal of the day and then taper off throughout the day? There are lots of different ways that you can distribute those calories, but you need to be able to use some type of approach for structure to help you get there. So now what we want to do is take those basic concepts of the idea of intentional eating and put this into a schematic that will allow you to hopefully operationalize this. And what I mean is basically something that you can look at or conceptualize this and say, okay, this is what this means practically. If I'm using intentional eating as a guiding principle, this is how I know if I am actually implementing something that's intentional eating on a regular basis. So I've come up with this little scheme that is based on a 2x2 rubric that should allow you to, at a very quick glance, understand or categorize an eating episode to understand is it intentional or not. All right, so here we go. So we're going to have two axes. So on the horizontal axis here, we're going to have quality, the quality of what we're eating. And then on the vertical axis, we're going to have the planning involved in that eating episode. So quality ranges from high to low. All right, so we're just going to cut this into two categories. Certainly there can be a range, but we're going to say for simplicity, it's either high quality or low quality food. And then on the vertical axis, we've got planning. This is either planned eating or unplanned eating. Okay, so let's build to intention. So first quadrant is high quality and planned. All right, so this is where the intersection is. High quality and planned. And what we're going to do is we want most of our meals to be in this space, right? Meals that we planned in advance and snacks that we've planned in advance, but the quality of those meals are generally going to be very high, right? This is something that your dietitian would approve of, okay? Now, on the opposite side of that, you got low quality meals that are unplanned, all right? Low quality and unplanned. So these should be rare, if at all, in your meal plan. And these are meals that would normally, maybe made up the majority of what you were eating before you joined the program. And now we're shifting out of that. So low quality and unplanned, what's an example of that? Well, it's a snack out of the vending machine that you just went and grabbed because you just got out of a very stressful meeting and you needed something to calm you down. All right, that's a low quality snack and it's unplanned, right? It's a spur of the moment impulsive decision. That's what would go in there. Contrast that to a high quality planned meal would be, oh, okay, I plan to have lunch today and I brought my healthy choice meal and I'm going to have a side salad with that, right? So that's a high quality and planned meal, and I planned that out in advance. All right, now on the other two boxes here, we've got planned meals that are low quality. Okay, what do we mean by that? So low quality and planned would be, for example, I'm going to have a birthday celebration and I know that we're going out to eat, and I decide that this is going to be a higher calorie meal and I'm going to have one or two of my favorite foods that I don't normally have, but I'm going to plan that all out and I'm going to portion control that. So that's an occasional, sort of episode of eating that I'm going to plan in advance. On the other hand, a high quality but unplanned meal is something that, comes up as a spur of the moment opportunity for eating, and it's appropriate. Okay, that's the caveat. It's appropriate, and I make a good choice in that, appropriate but unplanned opportunity. So, for example, this is, someone invites me out to dinner at the last moment. I had planned to go home, but I can take this opportunity to go out because I want to enjoy this meal out with someone else. And I'm going to make a good choice. I'm going to stay within my plan, even though this was an unplanned eating opportunity. All right, so those are the four categories: high quality and planned, low quality and planned, high quality unplanned, low quality and unplanned. So you can see we want to spend the majority of our time in this first quadrant, and we want to have very little of our eating episodes in this low quality and unplanned quadrant, or quadrant 4. Special occasions, again, are in the low quality and planned area. And then unexpected dinner out would be sort of an example of the high quality but unplanned. So hopefully that makes sense to people in terms of the different scenarios. And maybe there are some things that you've experienced recently that you can very easily sort of identify as being in one of those four quadrants. So I would say that about 75 to 80% of our time should be spent in quadrant 1. About 20 to 25% of our time should be in quadrants 2 and 3, and then less than 5% of our time should be in quadrant 4. So that means that by default, most of our eating opportunities are high quality and planned, and that helps us maintain consistency with this concept of intentional eating. So, take home message. Intentional eating requires you to distribute your calorie intake throughout the day, but you have to have a specific goal in mind for eating. So it's not just I'm eating because I'm hungry and that's the only reason I'm eating. I'm making specific choices because I have specific goals in mind. And those goals can be health maintenance, or they can be about improving health, modifying disease risk, modifying or treating current disease. Any of those types of things can be part of your goal making when you start thinking about intentional eating. To be intentional about your eating, you want to start with structure, including the timing and spacing. So again, what time of day will I start eating? When will I end eating? And then what's the frequency of eating throughout the day? What's the spacing? All of those things have an important impact on your energy intake. And then, as I said, about 75 to 80% of our eating episodes should be in that space 1, in that quadrant 1, which was planned and high quality. You got plenty of room to work with unplanned eating episodes that are high quality, or low quality eating episodes that are planned, but none of, if possible, none of our eating episodes should fall into the unplanned and low quality spaces. That should happen rarely. All right, so let's switch over from talking about intentional eating and talk about journaling and how we actually can use this tool to help us be more intentional about our eating. And this is a real, I think, important subject. We probably, our patients probably feel like we talk about it way too much because we're always harping on, did you journal? Do you have your journal? Let's look at your journal. And part of the reason that we do that, though, is because it's really, very crucial to helping you be successful. And I think with you now thinking through this idea of intentional eating, one of the only ways that you can know, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I eating intentionally? Is if you have some accounting for that. So let's go through this briefly here. So why journal? Well, first of all, it's the number one behavior that's associated with consistent weight loss. And here's an example of a study that Dr. Bartfield and I did a few years back. And what we did was we looked at weight loss outcomes in a study called the Premier Study. And we saw that individuals here in the red bar who were journaling 86% of the time, their probability, if they were journaling 5 or more days per week, they had an 86% probability of losing at least 5% of their body weight. Compare that to journaling 1 to 3 days, or 1 to 2.9 days per week. You cut that probability in half. right? So you go from 43% to 86% just by increasing the number of days that you write down what you're eating. I'm not saying that's causal, but it's a pretty strong association, and that's not just the only study that's ever shown that. Our study was very consistent with lots of other studies that have done, very similar analyses. So, how does writing down what you eat help with intentional eating? Because this is important. I think a lot of times what we hear people say is things like, "Well, I pretty much eat the same thing every day. I'm a creature of habit, and so I know what I've been eating, right? I generally eat the same thing every day." And then when you say, "Okay, well, let's go through a typical day," well, there are 5 different options for each meal, and depending on how you put those together and how much of those things you ate, the calories could range from 1,100 to 1,200 to 2,100. Who knows? And those little things make a difference, and so I think it's important for you to understand when we talk about journaling why it is that being specific and being consistent with writing down what you're eating helps you get to a more intentional eating place. So really there's nothing magical about the idea of journaling. You can't just assume that, well, if I write it down, then I'll do better, right? It doesn't necessarily work that way. But if you think about it, any of the things that we want to really sort of pay attention to and keep track of, we have to find some system for accounting for those things. We have to write it down. We have to keep a ledger. Here's an example of a good old-fashioned checkbook, right? Even if you do online banking and you haven't written a check in years, you still look at your statements on a regular basis, and you know when money is coming out and when money is going in order to be able to take account. If you don't track that spending, then you can't be surprised when you have an overdraft. So intentional eating really starts with the idea that you're going to be accountable because you have very specific goals in mind, and you need to understand exactly what you're doing. You need to get that feedback in order to be able to adjust your planning. So you need to be able to figure out, okay, how do I make the journaling work for myself? You can use the journal for meal planning. You can use the journal to help you think about, okay, what am I doing? I can journal ahead and then decide, all right, I know what I'm going to eat tomorrow. I'm making some plans for what I want to eat tomorrow. Let me go ahead and put that in my journal. And then the next day as I eat those things, I just check that off. I just say, okay, yes, I ate that, or no, I didn't eat that, and then I made a different choice. It was maybe an unplanned but high quality episode. Now I need to just make the substitution to put in what I actually ate. That's a great way of using the journal to help you with meal planning. You can use the journal to help you review your tendencies and start to think about your eating in the context of your day. So the journal can be a useful tool other than just a simple accounting of calories. You can look at lots of different patterns and understand lots of different things with that particular journal. So as a rule of thumb, when you come in the clinic or we see you by video visit, we always want to know, have you journaled? And we may want to review that journal. Why do we want to do that? Well, one of the things that's really important is understanding that losing weight and maintaining weight loss is not simply a calorie game. It's not just about, well, can I consume the fewest calories and keep my calories down for the longest amount of time? As I've talked about in that intentional eating rubric, quality matters. So it's not just the number of calories, but it's the quality of those calories that makes a big difference. And so we want to understand, if you say, well, I think I'm hitting my calories, but my weight is stable, or my blood sugar hasn't improved, or my cholesterol numbers haven't improved, what's the quality of what you're eating to make up those calories? Because changing that or adjusting that may make a difference in those types of outcomes. The other piece of that, as I said before, is that intentional eating is focused on high quality food and planning. Planning helps with the calories, but the qualities is really a function of your choices. So we want to take a look at your journal so that we can understand how you're putting those things together, and then give you feedback to help you achieve the types of goals that you want to achieve. So I think it's really important for you to be able to take advantage of that resource, in the best way that you can do that is by always bringing in your journal. Now, we may not look at it on every visit, but it's important to be able to note that you have it available and have it ready for review if we do decide, okay, this is the time that we need to look at it because maybe weight loss is less than expected, or we're finding that we're having some challenges or not seeing the kind of results that we want. Then that can help us really sort of hone in on the details of what we might need to do to help you. So, take home messages related to journaling. It's the most common behavior associated with successful weight loss, hands down. And most patients will tell me it's the thing I hate the most, but it's the thing that I know works the best. And I follow that up with, you don't have to like it, but you got to do it. It's never fun, but I think it's definitely very useful. And making a commitment to yourself that you're going to really work on that, doing that consistently, makes a big difference. It helps you achieve intentional eating because you can now be accountable, and then you can use that to guide your meal planning. You can look for patterns, you can look for tendencies. You can start to see, I think I really tend to want to end the day with something sweet, and so I find that sneaks in, into more and more of my days as an unplanned eating episode. How do I deal with that? That's something that you can look at from a journal and find those types of tendencies. And then, as I said, the dietary team can really help you manage using your journal to get better outcomes and avoid playing just a calorie game where you're making choices that are not as high quality, but certainly still keep you within the calorie limit, and that might have unexpected consequences for you in terms of your consistency with weight loss. Okay, so I'm going to give out some homework for those that are here online with us today. Here's what I want you to do. Over the next week, I want you to do an active food record, whether using the On-Track system or MyFitnessPal or just a plain old food journal, notebook, pen and paper, however you want to do it. I want you to record a food journal for the week, and then I want you to go through and rate how many of your eating episodes are in quadrant 1. Remember, quadrant 1 was planned and high quality, versus quadrant 4, which was unplanned and low quality. And then quadrant 2 was planned and low quality, so that was a special occasion type of deal. And then quadrant 3, which was planned or unplanned but high quality. So I want you to go through and rate all of your eating episodes, not the individual foods, but just the eating episodes. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. And I want you to, give yourself a fair rating and see how many of those are in quadrant 1 versus 4 or 2 and 3. And I think when people have done this exercise before, one of the things that they've told me is that when they find that more of their episodes are in quadrant 1, they see more consistent results. And they see that they're better able to achieve the goals that they're interested in achieving. So that'll be your homework. And for those who turn in a food record with this particular slide, and you've rated your 7-day food record in terms of the number of eating episodes that fall into those quadrants, you will get 5 bonus points when you turn that in the nutrition shop. All right, so I think that brings us to the end of our session here. If people have questions, I can hang around for a few minutes and see if there are any questions. Certainly appreciate everybody being online today and hanging out with me. Hopefully this was helpful. And I think you have the slides in the handout there, intentional eating handout. Take them, look at them. If you have questions later on, if something isn't quite clear, or you need me to clarify something, then please let me know. All right. Well, thanks for the feedback from everybody who's provided a comment there. Certainly appreciate it. And we'll see you around. Thanks for your time.